So digital-ready policy making is basically bridging the gap between digital-ready policy design and policy implementation. And why is it important? Because I believe that many colleagues from the SEMIC community come into the picture when it's in the implementation phase of a policy. So new data flows needs to be set up, IT systems supporting them. And maybe many of you have already suffered the frustration seeing that, oh, I have so great ideas, but something is already defined in law. I have requirements to respect, and now we cannot touch upon or reuse something I have knowledge about. So digital-ready policymaking exactly tries to address this problem, to raise awareness of policymakers early on, to reach out to the implementers, those who have this implementation knowledge from the ground, be them data experts, IT experts, business analysts, and bring it into the policy design. So let's give a second chance whether we get the definition of digital-ready policymaking, but not yet. So then digital-ready policymaking eventually, or policies become digital-ready when they foster this most policy implementation. Technical glitches, but you want to have slides, so you start with the thank you and we go for lunch. So, okay. Anyhow, I know by heart, so we can still move on, though as the slides are carefully prepared, so whenever they get on, could be interesting to have a quick go through. But okay, I already told a lot and I think passed the message several times. Multidisciplinary and do it and think early on. But why? Why the heck to do it? And it's because it brings benefits. It's very tangible benefits. If you invest, make these extra efforts to bringing together policy people and the implementation knowledge early on, then you can expect smoother, more efficient, more timely implementation. We have this nice regulatory sandbox instruments, for example, which you saw in the AI proposal and also in the upcoming Interoperable Europe Act, where you can give room for safe experimentation with these technologies. Then we can also do future proofing. So even if we don't aim at addressing emerging technologies right away, at least we can avoid to lock in ourselves in old technologies. And then beyond the benefits, of course, it's a must. This is what all the morning we heard. So even I got from the intro speeches that maybe digital transformation is already over, so next stage. But if digital transformation is over, or at least ongoing, it's a must for public administrations to do something about it. And digital-ready policymaking, in my view, is one crucial instrument, because policymaking is an evident instrument for them. Wow, something happening on the screen, guys. And if we bring in this digital-ready mindset, this will make the change. And by the way, mindset, this was another clue, a key word in the morning session by our high-level speakers. So, okay, digitally we are there, but in the mindset, it's still a long way to go. And we heard digital skills, digital mindset, so I will talk about digital-ready mindset, which is basically zooming into the policymakers and the policy audience. Okay, so this is then a recap of digital-ready policymaking. I think I talked you through that policies will get digital-ready if they enable smooth policy implementation by thinking through data and digital technologies early on, and that the policymaking, digital policymaking is nothing new in the sense, it's the policymaking process with the new mindset. And if we move on, the next one will show, or if I move on, no, if we move on, Then you see finally the components I told you about, and the third component was the reuse of data and once only principle. So here where semantic knowledge would very much help policy officers. And then the fifth one is innovative AI technology and digital technologies and the underlying multidisciplinary teams. If you are also curious of the other components, I very much hope so, then you have the link for an online training with a short animation explaining them. And if we move on, you can also see on the slide, if I move on, if someone moves on, then you will see on the slide the different profiles you would need in your multidisciplinary team, be them, as you see, policy experts of other digital policies, IT experts knowing the existing landscape, AI experts, we must have quite some in-house today for innovative elements, and of course semantic experts for data. And then we can cover the next slide very quickly, please move on, because this gathers and captures the elements, and I was just on the first bullet saying that it's a must. The second is of course promoting our lovely Interoperable Europe Act, because it will also incentivize this early thinking of implementation through the interoperability assessment instrument, so watch out what it will bring. And then I listed these benefits below. And when to do all that, it's basically in any policy domain, so do not mistake. It's not about digital policies like AI Act, Data Act. It's about any policies, because each of them can create new public services and each of them can get digital implementation. And when it comes in play, so far I just repeated policy design, but there is a whole policy cycle with policy, please stop here, with policy formulation, policy implementation, and feeding back the evidence to the policy design. Yesterday in the pre-conference workshop we zoomed in to the red bullets a little bit also with reporting obligations on feeding evidence to new policy. And today, if we move on, we will eventually with LOAS code zoom on policy formulation and policy implementation. And then this gives me also the opportunity to just give a bit of highlights of yesterday's pre-conference workshop. So if we move on, we had a first session exactly on the AI and digital-ready policy design, where we heard about very concrete use cases, especially thanks to Denmark representatives who explained that they would like to see whether AI could help them to identify in existing legislation those which are not digital-ready yet, burdensome or outdated. Then we went on to a little bit get a teaser of the SETA tool developed by the GRC, the Joint Research Center, and which you can find more about in the exhibition place. And then we closed this session with also this Sortis project, which was mentioned by Veronica in the very beginning, so hopefully you have expectations. And at the very end of today's session, I will tell you where you can find out more. This is basically about standardizing regulatory reporting obligations, which are almost in every legislation, because policymakers are greedy and want information back from policy implementation. Then we had another session at yesterday's workshop, which was zooming into AI and digital-ready legal drafting. There we first got to know Leos, which is the open source legal drafting tool developed by the Commission, and it's a sister product, the Accommand also for EU standard, which is also an open standard structuring legal documents. And then after setting the scene, we looked of course in AI and potential smart functionalities to be added to Leos. But as soon as we started to get AI, we got a bit anxious. So we looked at, okay, but can we trust AI? And all AI technologies are fine, or we need to pay attention. And we got some really intriguing examples where AI created some new legal texts referring to non-existent case law. So cautiousness is needed. So then we turned to explore, okay, what it makes trustworthy AI and what is our role even as user of AI. But then we finished off still with a plea that maybe legal drafting is a good use case to look at AI. And then finally we closed the pre-conference session with looking into the enablers. So the Publication Office outlined their view of the legal data space and the importance of having high value and high quality legal data in standardized format, because this was against this morning takeaway. Data is everything, the quality of data is everything, so we can have nice ideas and semantic AI projects if we have poor quality data. And then we had a very interesting bridge to this session today, so I will stop taking your time with the intro, because a colleague already made the speech that, okay, and then don't forget please about semantic web and linked open data if you want to go for LOAS code projects. And this would be maybe a pending question already to our speakers. Is it really a must, semantics, or we can go other ways? But after this introduction, so basically now it's really time to go to our panel. especially because we identified the use case of lowest code for this session, but you see that there exist other use cases potentially along the whole policy cycle. And I put in red also the robotic automation, because we are lucky enough to get a little bit of insights from the Spanish administration, what's happening around that. And then let me turn now to our panel. So we are lucky enough to have with us three distinguished speakers. First of all, Gregory Lefkowitz, Professor Gregory Lefkowitz from Belgium. Then Aitor Kubo Contreras, representing the Spanish administration, and Mr. Denis Merigout from a French research institute. I will give a proper introduction to each of them, but just explain you what will happen next. So each of our speakers will they have their showtime, and they will speak in a row. And after we will stop, sit in front of you, and we'll be ready to go in discussions. So I encourage you to, in the room, jot down your questions if you wish. And those following us online apparently got the code to Slido, so you can already online, as you hear something interesting or triggering, put your questions there, and we will do our best to address them. And with that, I turn to Professor Gregory Lefkowitz, who is professor at the Université Libre de Bruxelles and also leading the Smart Law Hub there. But he holds beyond this many other functions in interesting organizations. So he is principal investigator at the Artificial Intelligence Institute for Common Good in Brussels, but also member of the External Advisory Board of AI for Belgium, as well as the Club de Juristes Digital Task Force in Paris. And being a professor, of course, he gives lectures at many different universities like Sciences Po or HEC in Paris. And his research examines the interactions between law and digital technologies. So we're getting in the lowest code mode now. And also global and transnational law and transformations of legal professions. And he brings us already in this Halloween mood with the title of his presentation, which is Coding Law in Europe, Translation, Transformation, and Monsters. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. Can I have my slide back? So what I would like to do during this presentation is to introduce a bit rules as code and the connection with digital ready policy making, and then reflect a little bit. We're showing you some examples, what it means, that what can be potentially dangerous and what it requires to do that in a nice way, let's say. So, doesn't work?
No, you need to just.
Okay. So what we do at the Smart Law Hub that connects the ULB, High Paris, and University of Munich, Technical University of Munich, is we work on what we call the development of smart law. Smart law is not only, of course, it's a nice expression, but it's really the impression, it's not only connected to the digital, that there is a new ideal of law that is developing everywhere, that is people want, I'm not talking about what I believe, people want a law that is more scientific, evidence-based, mathematics, using indicator metrics, potentially mathematical models and reasoning, algorithmic, risk and technology-driven. And that is, you can examine this evolution in different contexts. And I think we are at a crucial moment, because everybody has discovered what a lot of people in informatics knows for a long time, that in fact information systems came to rule the world. That's already there. That was already there long before. It's a lecture from Bert Swanson. But no, it's really clear for policymakers that it's like this. And that's why, of course, you have this huge movement, including at the level of the European Union, but in different countries, that we need to have some kind of digital sovereignty, and we need to put rules and to rule the rule of the system. So, in this context, I think we have a tale of two very arrogant mindsets: the digital one and the legal one. I think it's really important, because both people, legal people, believe that they can solve any problem in the world with an ontology with three basic elements. First you have the persons, then you have the things, and then you have legal obligation or legal transactions. And with that, a lawyer can solve any problem. If you go with whatever problem, you say, okay, this is the person. This person has a relation with this one. There is a thing. It's owned by this one, and then they want to sell it, etc. They will do a contract, etc. And then you have the digital mindset. That's people from computer science. And they also have the same idea that they can deal with any kind of problem, because any kind of problem is basically data and data processing. And because they are both of them are kind of holistic, there is a lot of fight to a certain extent between these two perspectives or two mindsets. And for instance, lawyers will say, okay, but you know, in data you have also personal data. Oh my God, and then you have to treat personal data differently than the other data. And that starts to be a very complex problem for people doing informatics. And so you have some kind of fights there. So of course, regarding regulation, no, can switch. Then of course, lawyers say, okay, but you know, digital technologies is a thing. So we need to regulate the thing. We will do that with our traditional way, and then we will produce regulation, GDPR, AI Act, Data Governance Act, etc. And we will put more and more legal rules that will rule the technology. And on the other side, you have the people from computer science say, okay, but you know, law is nothing else than data and data processing. So we should translate law into data and data processing, and then we can optimize the system. And I think that is the kind of framing and where the idea of rules as code come. So rules as code is a kind of policy movement that is to a certain extent supported by the OECD and with different tentatives, saying, okay, we should do something about law because law is not optimized for a digital system. And if you can move, what we should do, because we are in a digital environment, is that from the very beginning, we should prepare the law both in natural language and in computer language. And ideally, if we do that, we do this co-drafting, then we will have machine consumable or machine executable rules. And then we can directly implement the rule in the organizations, basically. So because there is a problem with the way law is produced today, I mean, that's the argument of the rules as code movement, is that you have a legislation that is drafted. Then you have a publication of the law. Then you have in all the businesses, for instance, you will have the legal department that will read the law, try to interpret it, to understand what it means for this organization. And then they will write another text explaining what is the thing. Then they will, because anyway, most of the requirement will have to be integrated in the IT process. They will discuss and send this interpretation to the people taking care of the IT system. And the people will have to decide how they will implement this interpretation in the IT process. So then you have a lot of translation, and there the idea is that you have a translation gap. So because for not all of the rules, but for some of them, you have this translation gap, it would be so nice to have directly produced by the legislator the code that you can directly implement it there. That's the idea. And because you will have that, then you can also imagine a lot of reuse. You can reuse this code and this machine readable and machine executable rules in order to develop a lot of new applications from chatbot information services. Consumer associations can use that to make the rules more useful or more accessible or more actionable. And so you have a lot to reuse there, and that is the idea of, I mean, to a certain extent, government as a platform, because then you provide the legislation and it's a building block for others to develop new tools. Digital Ready Policies and Legislative Acts, it was already perfectly presented, so I will not go into the detail, but it's a little bit that I think, to a certain extent, is the translation of this from the European perspective. And you find exactly in the document that was published in July 2023, on Better Regulation Toolbox, this idea that there is this problem that we want to address of the gap between policy formulation and its digital implementation. So we want to reduce the gap between the intent of the policymaker and the people that implement the rules, mostly companies or associations. So, of course, this is quite touchy because that makes a lot of sense from the perspective of the administration. But traditionally, the idea is that we have a division of power, and normally it's the parliament that adopts the rule, then you have the executive branch that execute the rule, and then you have the judges that interpret the rules. And of course, if you want to align intent with what people have to do, it's going more in the direction of more power for the executive power and less power for the two other powers. So it's something to be addressed for sure. But with the same idea at the European level, that then if you have these rules as code and it's interoperable, then you can really foster the development of trans-European digital public services infrastructure, because then every other countries can also use the tools that you have developed, the software you have developed, and they can directly connect this software in their own legal order. And that is the idea from moving from legal transplant, that was traditionally the idea in comparative law. Okay, you take an institution and then you develop it somewhere else and you see if it works or not. But instead of having legal transplant, you have law plug and play. That's the idea. So they have a very fantastic system to deliver public services. Then we will just connect and use exactly the same because we have access to the code. So of course this is, can we move on? Then the question is, how do you translate? I'm already there. Okay. So the question is how you translate. And the problem is that it's not a translation. So because if you take the legal rules and then you try to translate, you have so many problems at the semantic level that what is a residential property? Do we have data that are timely, etc., regarding residential property or regarding usual place of residence? It's a nightmare. That's the first thing. The second one is that rules were not designed to be implemented or coded or automated. That means that, for instance, if you take a very simple rule, speed limit, 60 kilometers or 50 kilometers per hour, you implement that like this with a machine, it's a nightmare. You have accident everywhere because if you prevent people to go faster, etc., it's you will have a lot of traffic problem. So that means that when you want to transform a rule that is there into something that is in computer code, it's not the same rule because it's in fact an intersemiotic translation. So you need to redesign the rule so that you can implement it. But then you change the law. So that is a problem. Because for new legislation, it's easy because you introduce code drafting, and then from the very beginning you have the rules as code approach. But with the existing legislation, so then you have to do a lot of work. First, you have to have the access to the legislation. It's not the case everywhere. And then you have to pre-process, to do domain knowledge, to develop ontology, knowledge graph, etc., until you can try to do prototyping of executable code. So that's a lot of work. So it's better to focus on what really makes sense, because if the idea is to transform the all the rules that exist into computer code, I think we will never reach this goal. So what we have developed, for instance, in Brussels for the region is a system that helps the legislator to analyze the complexity, because that's one of the big aspects, the complexity of the rules, so that before adopting a rule, they know, for instance, okay, so this is, for instance, the urban planning code. And each dot is, for instance, the number of cross-reference. So that gives you an idea of the complexity, because then you can measure how many texts you need to read in order to understand what this legislation means. what is the level of education you need to understand the rule. All these elements can be used in order to have better legislation as a better start, or to reform some rules in order to have a better start. But then we have also developed some tests for technological neutrality, or only once principle, to flag in the text where you have potential problem. That is already an improvement. Of course, it's not rules as code yet, but it's an improvement of the legislation. And then you can go further, because we don't have metrics. We need metrics to have an idea what kind of rule you can automate it, and what kind of rule you cannot automate it, because that's a very huge problem. And then if you understand that, you understand it's not translation, so it's a transformation. Then you need to rework the whole policy and lawmaking process for the new rules, because you need a very different way to look at the rules than the one we have actually. Because if your idea is to develop software, then it's better to develop directly a software and then to put a rule that explains the software. So if you needs to be understood is that we need to have a different way to develop the rules if we want to have a rules as code or the digital ready legislation. And what for AI, and I'm done here, you have a lot of things to do with AI. The problem is that you should not forget that law is not only a set of rules, it's also legal social practices. And that's why I think there is a lot of things to do with machine learning, because then you can extract information from what is done exactly in practice, for instance, from judges, etc., etc. And to do that, we need, and I think that's something the European Commission would be really helpful to do, to have expert annotated data sets, because ChatGPT is this level of F1 score for tasks regarding GDPR, for instance. But you can really improve the thing if you have really high level quality annotated data set, and that's something is needed if we want to go further in using AI for rules as code approach. I'm sorry, it was too long.
Many thanks, Gregory, for already this lot of food for thought, and I'm still wondering about the monsters, by the way, so maybe we can get back to them in the panel session. But before that, we have our next speaker already ready to take the floor. He is Mr. Aitor Cubo Contreras, who is General Director for Digital Transformation of the Administration of Justice in Spain. He started his career as a near IT expert in the public administration in 2006 and became specialist in government and digital transformation until he took up his current position in 2020. And what I found very interesting in his biography, that beyond holding a degree in computer engineering, he spiced it up with psychology. And I truly believe that for digital transformation to happen, we need some psychological hints here and there. So let's see what's happening in Spain in this direction.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. The first thing I want to do is to thank the European Commission and also the General Secretariat for Digital Administration for the invitation to this event, because we are working in the justice sector, and it's not so usual that the justice sector participate in that kind of events, and the digital transformation that we are in process here in Spain, I think is quite important to share. First of all, I want to, next one please, next one. I want to tell a little bit about who are ourselves. The General Directorate of Digital Transformation of the Administration of Justice provides technology services of the Ministry. Is something common to all the ministries, but what brings us here is that we provide IT system also for 5 of the autonomous regions in Spain. In Spain, the justice sector usually depends of the autonomous regions. We are like a federal state. But in 5 autonomous regions, the ministry provides all the IT services, from laptops to communication and also the IT system. It's important the level of the general directorate because it's the highest level, so we can, it's quite important for digital ready policy making because you are in the decision core of the ministry and the decision core of everything, so you can provide the insights for the digital ready of all the legislation. As I told you before, the justice is transferred to the autonomous region. We provide all the system in 5 of them. This is the provision of IT system for the ministry. This is the provision, is a second hat that we have as a second sector, the provision of justice. Open interfaces with private sector and other sector, and talk about also about information system. And one of the things and the main subject of this law is the data-oriented project. Before talk about that, you can see on the screen, we are drafting this law in the LEOS project of European Commission. And it's amazing because, just 1 minute, it's amazing because you can solve a lot of problems because drafting a law is horrible, it's so complicated, there are so many people working in the same document, and also you have a law based on data. Each paragraph and each link is data, so it's quite useful because you change, for example, you insert a new article and the system fully automatically rename all the information, so it's amazing. So I tell you that using LEOS is a very good option for drafting law. One of the main projects of the law is the data-oriented justice, and this is absolutely important for the ministry and is absolutely strategic. In Spain, 4 years ago, in all the autonomous region of the ministry, the justice is fully digital, but it's document-oriented. What we was doing here in the last 4 years is go through a justice that is digital, but based on document that someone had to read, someone had to say, well, then go to this office or to this judge or take that decision. We are working in a data-oriented justice, and we are very proud of have the public manifest for data in justice. is a very good thing that is signed for the judges, the prosecutor office, the autonomous region, and the Ministry of Justice, and set the basis to do an absolutely data-oriented justice, and that is quite important for us. All the things that we told before allow us to deploy artificial intelligence, low as code, and robotization in many processes in the justice system. Because I don't know before, because I work in general public administration, but in justice, almost everything is code. It's not so open like the general legislation. Here in Spain, we have the procedural laws that say how a tribunal or a court must work in each case face by face and data by data, and you have all the information in the law. So we deploy several projects on artificial intelligence. We started to the no problematic artificial intelligence project, like the automatic translation. In Spain, the trials are filmed, so you sometimes 400 hours of video. We have an AI system that translates that to text, and you can search for a text. Prosecutors and the judges in the judicial decision. But we want to stress the robotization initiatives, because this is absolutely amazing, and they can do a lot of good things for citizens and with a huge impact in the judicial system. All of them are work. It's not a pilot, it's not a project. It's a reality, and we also will see some information about this project and the impact on the citizenship. But we have a process that reply the information that is set by the law. So the law is translated to code directly, and this code works in a fully automatic way in order to provide some services. We highlight here some of them, but the importance of this project is the impact in the citizens and the public service, and we will see just three examples. First of all is the granted of nationality of Spain to people. This is amazing. We have a huge backlog because we don't have civil servants. It's happened to everyone. So we have a backlog of 5 years to get the Spanish nationality, because you have to go through a process that is quite complicated. But this process is explained step by step and data by data by law. If you are from a third country, you have to spend 10 years in Spain. You cannot go out more than 6 months. You have to not have criminal record in your country. You have to not have criminal record here. It's by law, and it's not a decision. You have the law. If you comply the law, you have the Spanish nationality. If you don't, you don't. This is fully automatic process. And that has several advantages, because you can check the information, for example, of the criminal records with a robot in a fully automatic way. And this is not only good for civil servant, public service, and the citizen. There is no mistake. It's impossible. Imagine if you are from a country and you have to read names of a country in other language, Indian, Pakistani, Arabic, for 8 hours. The possibility of human error is huge. But here is a robot. It's not possibility in error, because they can differentiate one Mohammed with 2 H which one is different. The machine is no problem with at all, but one human that is processing that information for 8 hours, they can have more problems. So here is not only the impact of more than 2,060 people that are granted his right, and it affects they and their family. It's also important because you improve the legal certainty of the country, and you protect not only the information, also the security of the country. Another key project is the automatization of the erase of the criminal record. When you have a legal offense, it depends, it's also by law. For this kind of crime, you have to wait 8 years in order to erase your criminal record. For this kind of crime, you have to wait 13, 30, whatever. But it's by law, and the data are there. So we don't have enough civil servants to do that. What happened until now? The people has to ask, even with a lawyer, to erase the criminal record. We are doing that in a fully automatic way with robotic process. And that is important because the public administration work proactively for the citizen, and the citizen has the same right. Even if you are a high-level citizen with a lot of money and you have a lawyer, a personal lawyer, even if you don't have, speak or you don't have any idea of law, the
Many thanks, Aitor. So far we already heard from Gregory the importance of somehow bringing together the arrogant digital and also arrogant legal mindset and move away from translation to transformation. And I heard also the need for these semantically annotated data sets. Then we saw with Aitor further enablers, like we may need tools like Leos, which in the future could help with the semantic annotation of legal data. We also saw eventual concrete projects ongoing and their impact, which is great. But now it's time to deep dive eventually. How is load as code happening? And this is thanks to our first speaker, Denis Mérigou, who is a starting researcher at INRIA Paris. And his research domain is at the intersection of computer science and law, so not a surprise. He's committed, and his goal is really to make law automated in a new way, so it can have a smoother and more efficient implementation. And he selected one specific domain. So this is, he's focusing on systems levying taxes or distributing social benefits. And for that, he co-designed with lawyers, being a computer engineering guy, but the Catalan domain-specific language. So we will hear about this language now and see the next steps for his projects. Denis.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for having invited me. So be assured that I have only 3 slides. But if you want more details, of course, feel free to come ask me after the session or during the panel. Oh, okay, so this works. This is good.
Even with 3 slides.
Yes, even with 3 slides. So Gregory, let's not jump too fast. Gregory was talking about monsters. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is a kind of monster, which is sort of a Frankenstein thing, which people seems to have forgotten about. And they're creeping out some in various occasions because somehow they don't work, even though we expect them to work, right? And this is the elephant in the room. I mean, there are already automated parts of law, and there have been since the 60s, 70s, 80s. There was a huge movement of mechanizing a collection of taxes and the distribution of social benefits in all the developed countries. And there has been this knowledge and this know-how to how to automate these tasks, which has been practiced since a lot of time. And I think we should take particular attention to it because it might contain ideas that we can recycle for other low automation projects, but also pitfalls that we should avoid. And one of those pitfalls is that the systems that we develop are going to run indefinitely. They're going to run for an indefinite amount of time, including like 50 years, 60 years from now. And the challenge of maintaining those systems is really, really hard, because as you can see, the size in terms of lines of code of the piece of code that distributes social benefits or that compute taxes is in the hundreds of thousands or even the millions. So if you're a programmer, you already know that maintaining 1 million lines of code base is a hard challenge. But then the problem is that the law changes every year, so you have to update it, which means that unlike for banks, which have their transaction software written in the 80s, but then you don't have to touch it, right? This stuff you have to continually update it, and this is a real challenge. Oh, who's trying to go ahead? I have 3 slides. I'll Ah, ok, I see. Ouais, on va faire ça parce que ça va être plus facile. Okay. So this is the state of affairs, and I come from a subfield of computer science called formal methods, which is a field that tries to raise the level of assurance in software that run planes, run trains, run nuclear power plants. So I'm trying to say, okay, we have the systems, they're here for a long time, and they're critical for establishing the public trust in the administration, because I'm sure you all have in your countries an example of, my taxes were incorrectly computed, or there's been this industrial failure of I don't know which government agency because of one of these systems. So I think we really should treat them as critical software and raise the level of software engineering practices and to the level of software engineering practices and systems design that is applicable to critical software. And this is the mindset with which I've been trying to tackle this problem. Also, so I've been also, of course, inspired by the rules as code movement, which Gregory mentioned. But at the same time, I didn't want to disturb the basic concept of rule of law and the separation of powers in the administrative state. So whenever they're going to transform law into code, I will limit myself to, okay, we take existing laws. I'm not trying to reinvent how law is made. So that is a worthwhile problem to be discussed about. But since I want to eventually get to a result, I have to narrow the focus of my work. Maybe you can go to the next slide now. So I've been trying to develop a methodology over the past years with other researchers in law or in social sciences to try and take the concepts of critical software and apply them to the task of transforming law into code for these tax collection or benefit distribution systems. And there are basically 3 pillars in the methodology which I've developed. The first pillar is, it's called literate programming. So this is something that the AI and law community has identified since the 80s. And you have to have a direct matching between the legal requirements and the code if you want to be able to maintain it properly in the future. Because whenever law changes, right now in all of the systems I've shown previously, there's somebody which has been sitting in this office for like 15, 20 years, that knows in his head, oh, Article 22 has changed. Oh, but then we have to go to this file and change that thing. But whenever this person leaves, then this correspondence goes away, and it's very hard to recover it. So that's why if you want to build a system like that, you have to have this correspondence, which they call isomorphism, if you like mathematical terms. The second pillar is pair programming, because if you want to transform law into code, you'll have to, of course, pair together the legal expertise and the computer science expertise. And some people advocate for creating and training these super experts that are both experts in computer science and in legal expertise, but this is very hard because you have so many years of training you can do in your life. Instead, I advocate taking, again, another idea from agile methodology, the idea of pair programming, where you have a lawyer and a programmer sit in the same room looking at the same code, which also contains reference to the law, and actually you simply have a discussion between, oh, I'm going to bring your programming that way, oh, but if you do that, you're taking a wrong legal interpretation, oh yes, let me change that thing. And so you can have these sessions, and eventually you converge on an implementation, which is also an interpretation that has to respect the official administrative position to be translated into the code. And so this process, it favors deliberation over the traditional V-shaping process where lawyers like redact specifications, but they think the specifications are not precise enough. So then actually what happens is that even though the two teams are supposed to communicate via documents, they are on the phone all the time, and usually in different buildings, so this is very inefficient. Also, it provides for better human resources management because then there's all the knowledge is written into the code, in the code comments, and then if you need to replace someone, the training time will be lessened. And finally, the third pillar is open source. So these are public algorithms. There are various provisions for these public algorithms to be open source already in all the member states. But also, if you proactively publish open source, I mean, it brings the benefits of rules as code that Gregory was talking about last time. Another thing is that it facilitates the deployment of these software into any organization, public or private, that would need it. And this is something because if it's not private, if it's not open source, then you'll need like a hierarchical approval to deploy the thing, and then it can take months, and then people start developing their own code instead, and then they develop it with mistakes, and you lose the mutualization benefits. Last slide. So this is the methodology, but I've also been trying to come up with a concrete actual tool to be able to do that, which I've called Catala in the memory of Pierre Catala, who's a famous lawyer in France. I know it also means Catalan in Catalan, but I mean, okay, it's okay. You have to choose a name. And you can see it works like that. It embodies the principles that I've put forward. So you basically have a little snippet of law, which you copy-paste from the official legal publication office. You can also have like an API to do that automatically for you if you want. And then you basically the slide. No, the one after. Yes. So this language is already experimented in France for the computation of income tax, which is provides a quarter of the state's income. And it will take many years for us to finish this, but at least we started. We've already battle tested that on an implementation of the housing benefit, which represents like 20,000 lines of code. Yes, a single housing benefit is 20,000 lines of code, but this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. And I'm trying to get it tested and approved by the French Benefits Agency, but it was mostly developed as a research prototype at the moment. And there's a bonus because the field of formal methods, if you code up your things in a formal language, then you can have all sorts of static analysis and formal verification tool to help you detect incoherences. And this is where we get back to the interoperability thing. Because when you code up something like that in a strongly typed language, and of course Catala is strongly typed, then you have a very good description of what is your input, what is your output, and this can be fed up into the ontologies and provide the base for an interoperability scheme for, let's say, social benefits application files between different countries or fiscal declaration between different countries. And having these static analysis, being able to not only analyze the input data structure, but also the code, that would bring, I think, very valuable insights, even though it's a little bit more on the research side and not on the actual deployment side at the moment. But INRIA I'm very happy that INRIA is funding this whole initiative, and also on the operational side, but also on the research side to unlock those benefits in the future. And thank you very much for having listened, and please don't forget you can come to me for details if you want after.
Okay, so many thanks for our speakers, and I invite you now to take your seats on the panel. It's good news that the hard part of the session is over. No more slides, or only one left, and I asked the team just prepare that very last for the last seconds of the session. Though we lost some time, so for the continuation, I propose 15 minutes for the questions and answers, and I will take only 1 or 2 more minutes at the very end before we split for lunch with some announcements. So with that, I think at least myself, I got really enthusiastic because I heard quite some enthusiasm from our speakers, some selling factors as well, benefits of lowest code. So maybe some of the colleagues in the room have already some gut feeling, maybe I should try this. But my question to our panel is that what would you advise? So how to start, where to start? I have two sub-elements here. So how to come over this digital versus legal mindset and eventually bring these people over the phone to the same room, as Denis mentioned, and also where, on which project. So is any kind of rules is fine for automation, or we should be selective? Who would like to start?
Maybe Gregory?
Okay.
Gregory.
So I think that you have very different. So rules as code is always. I mean, and I think it was really well developed by Aitor. You have rules that describe what the administration should do. This procedure, etc. This is. I mean, I think that's good case to code and potentially automated the process. Then you have more complex rules that goes into substantial rights or very abstract concepts, or the legislator has decided to integrate expressions like reasonable, and this is probably not the best case, the best use case, because it's really complex, and the risk is to have. I mean, you have already the risk when we did not discuss about monsters, but you have already the risk when you have clear procedure, because you still have a discrepancy between what is indeed today implemented and what is written in the law sometimes. But if it's really abstract and substantial, it's really complex.
Okay, Aitor, do you agree on that?
Yes, absolutely agree, and I have two tips more. More than 50% of each project is the change management of all the actors involved in the project. So we are showing you the data and the information of the success project, but it's quite hard, and you have to have the cooperation among actors in a very formal way sometimes. So that is quite important. It's not technology, it's not easy. And I recommend to start in the most successful things that you have to get good results, because sometimes we try to do the most important thing, or we try to do the thing that has most impact, but if you don't have a success, it's impossible to do the complicated things. So we started with several projects that are easier than this, and after we gain some political clout and importance in the sector, we can manage to do a much more complicated things in the justice sector with judges and prosecutors.
Many thanks. Denis, your point of view.
Yes, so I have I think a more conservative and empirical point of view on that question. I think that basically we already found the places where automation could be a big win, and that starts with, of course, taxes and social benefits. And as I've seen, there is also a possibility to unlock way more benefits in terms of saving man-hours. But I think we should start by the case that have already been done, but in a way that's maybe not doesn't respect the high principles that the SEMIC community, in terms of trustworthiness of the computer systems, has been developed. And I would say that approaches that tend to forget those things that have already been done and only focus on the new issues will induce in the public some sort of, okay, but there's these new shiny systems that seems to work well, but all the old stuff that has problems and it's not really getting challenged. So my message would be to not forget these old things that have already been automated.
Okay, I don't know whether Gregory would like to come back on this specifically, because what I saw in your presentation was a bit advising the other direction, go for the new one first, because the old one is so resource intense and complicated.
Yes, so it's a little bit more, it's not exactly this one, it's the thing that the best. So when you have, you take a law that was passed in 1980s, it was not designed to be implemented with this kind of techniques. So of course, that's why they focused at that time on tax, social benefits, because you have numbers. So it was numbers, that's okay for computers, but if there is no number, that was not the idea. So I think it's really, if you start today to write a new rule, like you have a lot of, I think we have a lot of job to do, for instance, in urban planning, because everywhere urban planning is a disaster. Then you should think from the beginning that in fact you want to have some kind of IT tools in order to automate the process, make it more fluid, etc. And if in that case, then the way you will draft the law is completely different. Then you design first the process, the workflows, etc. You design first the application, basically, and then you write the law on this basis.
Okay, many thanks. I suggest that we take one or two questions from the room. I'm just looking at the support team whether we have a mic. So if any of you has a question, I see already one here and two there. So two questions to start with, but we need a mic. I can give my first. Sorry, Monica, I had a hand first.
Okay. Thank you. Just one question. And how do you get IT people and lawyers and legal people talk together in the same room and not dying in the effort?
Yeah.
We are already in the same room, by the way. any dead? Not yet.
So I have my experience is that today, when I started my career, it was not like that. But today, my research group is 50% computer scientists, 50% lawyers. So they get acquainted to work together. And if you don't do that, you have a problem. And the idea of these people is that they do not want to talk with each other. So, or sometimes it's, oh no, but this is the technical, I will do that, just explain me, or I do not want to enter into these technicalities, I will explain you the principle of law, and that's really a problem, and you need to develop, that's one aspect, we need excellent data, we need to have good technologies, we need to have a strategy, but we need specific skills, and I think that's, what we do is we do the training, we train people, to be able to know enough so that they can communicate, and I think that's key.
Well, here in Spain we have a body that is by royal decree, and we have to sit together with the Consejo General del Poder Judicial, the judge sector, the public prosecutor office, and also the autonomous communities, the IT sector and the legal sector. So we are, by royal decree, we have that kind of connection, and it works well. But you have also to have meetings with the private sector. Here in the ministry, we right now have a good relationship with everyone, the lawyers, the bar association. We have meetings with them each month, half a month. Tomorrow I will be in the meeting of the lawyers of Spain in Córdoba. So we have a good relationship, and here in Spain we also have the Forum of Digital Transformation of Justice. It's open to the public, you can look for it in Google, and it's a public an open forum with all the private sector, all the companies, the IT companies and the legal companies, and it's absolutely open for the public. So you have to make that kind of meetings and relationship with all the sector in order to set up that kind of projects.
Yeah, I have to report that if you really go to the actual workers, like the programmers and the lawyers doing the specifications, and you say, oh, maybe you could meet together, and yes, we should. I mean, they're all for it. But it's just you have to convince the management. And then my way of doing that was say, oh, we should do agile methodology, because agility is something that managers have been sensibilized to for the past decades. But it's just a trick, I would say.
Excellent, thank you. And please, we have a next question from Monica.
Thank you so much for the panelists' presentations. So a little comments. So thank you so much for your approach. Just to say that a Comantoso standard can detect many of the problems that you have underlined, like the management over the time, also derogation and so. So the integration also of standards and semantic can resolve a lot of these. But the question is another side. Many of your scenarios need also an interaction more and more with the end users. So intelligence, artificial and the human, should cooperate together for coping with your goals that you perfectly presented. My question is, did you already, or you are investigating also human-computer interaction, a new way for performing the transformation, the digital transformation with a human-centered approach? Thank you so much for your job.
Yes. Okay, so very quickly we start a project. We just start a project, we get the answer from the government to try to have citizen participation in coding law. So I don't know how we do that, but we will try to do that.
Well, in Spain, in these last 4 years, the citizenship is in the center, is the focus of the project. We have a project called Carpeta Justicia, Citizen Folder for Justice, and we are open to suggestions. And not only that, we have several events, big events, and we have a working group with user to define the implementation of this Carpeta Justicia, where you can see, for example, if you're a citizen, if you have a scheduled meeting in a court, you can see so we are very near all the citizens, and as we have all the electronic file in the cloud, is nowhere, so is everywhere. So we managed to get an agreement with the municipal bodies in order that a citizen that doesn't want to go to a court and want to talk with someone that maybe is even a family, because in the small village everybody knows each other, can access to all the services of justice. And I can, I am out of time, but I can explain a lot of project that is delivered in that way, and is amazing because, for example, in Formentera, a tiny island south of Ibiza, they don't have to go to Ibiza, to the civil registry, to do a marriage or to say okay to the granted nationality, because they can do through video conference in this Oficinas de Justicia en el Municipio, Municipal Justice Office.
Thank you. Danny?
Okay, thank you, Monica, for your question. I would say that this question, like I've worked on it quite a bit because I went to interview social caseworkers to see what were their need if we were to provide them explanations of the decision that happened, right? And what they said to me was, I mean, I hadn't thought out the before, but they said to me, but don't you realize that we spend 50% of our time trying to recover lost passwords of people to log into the benefits agency time? We don't have time to see how this thing is made or to investigate an explanation of the decision. We just need the system to be good. So it also means that yes, you should have human-centric and and external participation, but at the same time, you don't want to impose a burden of work to debug the system on the external users. And I mean, that's the message I got from the social case workers, which is why in turn I refocused my explanations so that, of course, they're delivered to the people because the people have right to explanations, but they're tailored in a way that they actually can help the designers of the system debug it if they're presented with them those explanations.
Okay, and with that, we almost ate off our time, but I do not want to deceive our online audience. So if you allow, I would like to pick the most voted question there, and I ask our panelists to be brief with their answers, so then I can just make a last announcement and we can explore the lunch menu. So, do you think public algorithms are key? Here in Spain, the organism responsible for security denied the openness of an algorithm about some public aid allocation due to security reasons. What is your view about that openness?
I think openness is quite important. We have published the data, and you can access in datos.justicia.es. There is a lot of information that is open for the public in the data of all the system. You also have publicly informed the information of fairness, accountability and transparency of all of our algorithms, and is published also in the web page of the Ministry of Justice. But sometimes all the information about the algorithms sometimes are protected by law, and sometimes has problem with cybersecurity. You cannot imagine how many attacks we are having right now in all public sector, but we are not talking about that, but in justice sector, once you are absolutely digital, it's a key element to get attacked by other countries, and so there are several cyber.
Yeah. Thank you. The other two speakers would like to contribute?
I have a personal experience because I've also been denied access to an algorithm based on security reasons. I won't tell which one. Also the case, I happened to have access to the algorithm later under an NDA. I can say this was not because of security reasons, it was another concern. The problem is that when you get denied this, you have no way to check, because you can't have access to the algorithm. So you're forced to rely on the administration's opinion, then you can challenge it in court, but then in court your argument gets thin, because you have to convince a judge that a particular piece of code doesn't have security vulnerabilities, which is almost impossible. So I think this is a major obstacle, and when an administration resorts to security,
please on the next step, so stay in touch. As I started, I saw the opportunity today to meet you, the SEMIC people, but also bring some from the digital ready community, and for me interoperability is about connections, so this is the key. So how we can continue maybe together with some of you. First of all, this abbreviation of SORTIS can get more clarity if you join us on the 9th of November. It's specifically advertised under the SEMIC community to learn how we see standardizing the regulatory reporting metadata vocabulary and see it as a future enabler for lowest code setting reporting obligations. Then we would like to also promote a peer event from Cohubical, which will be the cross-disciplinary research in computational law, and some of our speakers, like Denis, will be there, and you can go deeper and deeper into lowest code. And finally, as I said, please watch out or check out our community, which is now called Better Legislation for Smoother Implementation, but will become Digital Ready Policymaking soon, and see, because we have content there on lowest code as well. We would like to find legal semantics projects with you, and soon we will also publish a first training on lowest code, so maybe you can be the testers of that. And with that, many thanks for your patience, for encouraging smiles when everything seemed to be not working, and have an excellent lunch and continuation of the conference. Thank you.